Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening.
This morning I was thinking about a student that used to come to Zenwest. Well, actually, he used to come to the Victoria Zen Center before it was Zenwest. His name was Eshu. And he was the third person that received Jukai here at Zenwest. Early on, did a lot of sessions back in a time when there weren't a lot of people around Victoria Zen Center. There was just a small group of, I would say, quite dedicated, serious practitioners, people who did most of the sessions that we held, which were at that point 2 times a year. Seishu did a lot of practice with us and trained in most positions. Life circumstances being always changing as they are, Seishu's practice moved away from our community, but he's always maintained his practice and maintained contact and relationship with me. His practice took him to different training centers where he did sessions in different communities. One time I remember after he had completed a session, he came and we had tea together and we were just talking about it. And one of his observations was that he wondered if the people in our community realized how lucky they were to be able to engage with training offices. What he was talking about was that when you're training in a larger center, when you're going as a guest or as a lay practitioner to a monastery, the people who are doing the officer positions are usually long-term or residential practitioners. Even when I was training, in order to even hold one of the offices, Jikijitsu or Shoji or Densu or Tenzo or any office, you needed to be ordained. So as a lay practitioner going into a sesshin, there just wasn't any opportunity for you to do that. Even in the occasions when there was a residential trainee who was filling the role, sometimes it was of something as big as Tenzo. So they were doing all the cooking and all the managing and of the food and resource for the community. That person was still called the shoten because you had to be an ordained person in order to hold the role. This is a comment which points to the maturity or the ripeness in practice, particularly in a residential or monastic environment that's really required in order to do those roles. I'm not saying that anybody, any human being can learn how to ring bells, or to prepare a butsudan and put flowers on it, or to lead the chanting, or to make the tea. There's always a sort of practical, logistical, dewy, tasky kind of aspect to all of the training roles. All of them, all the way up to abbot. There is a tasky, jobby, dewy kind of aspect to it. But because this is Zen practice, our primary focus is not on our tasky, dewy, performy, job aspect. As practitioners, when we engage in these kinds of training roles, as with our koan practice, they are manifestations of the Dharma. And as much as it's required, I shouldn't say that it's not a tasky thing. There's always tasks to do. There's always little jobs and details of each particular training role to do. But as we engage in practice and as we deepen in our practice, not just in our training roles, but in our life in general, more and more becomes clear that we are moving from simply sort of a person doing the task at hand, one thing after the other in a busy world of separate objects. We transition towards allowing the Dharma activity to flow through us, so that our I am self, our ego personality, becomes less and less involved with each of the activities that we do. This is why in Zen practice, in formal Zen training, each of these training roles has kind of its own character. The Jikajitsu has a character. The Jikajitsu is concerned with boundaries and schedule and form. Their attention is dispersed across the whole group in the Zendo. And their job is really to maintain balance, to maintain focus, to maintain attentiveness, and to ensure that the whole practicing body can move through the day of practice harmoniously. As a Jikajitsu comes to this practice and comes to this role, a lot of the time as the Jikajitsu does the job, everything they do, from how they ring the bell, how they make a correction, how they, the pace that they're walking, at the beginning, it's all scented. It's all flavored with the individual practitioner's personality. This comes through, you can almost feel and hear and smell and taste the thought process that's going on of the person. All kinds of concerns can come up for Jikajitsu. I'm also need to make clear, I'm not speaking in particular about this particular Jikajitsu or any Jikajitsu. I'll be talking about me as Jikajitsu. I often am talking about me as these roles, because that's, I base what I'm talking about on my own experience. So as ring the bell, the Jikajitsu rings the bell. The pace that the Jikajitsu sets, all of it starts off being influenced, being flavored, being scented by the personality of that person. The capacity to manifest as Jikajitsu is limited only by the amount of connection or attachment that the individual has to themselves as being something separate from Jikajitsu. As we practice more and more, and as we let go more and more of who it is we think I am, what it is that I think I can do, or what it is that I think I can't do. The kinds of things that I would never say, or never ask, or never push people to do. As I let go of these more and more and allow this activity to fulfill the role of Jikajitsu, the scent of that individual, the flavor of that individual personality diminishes more and more until what we have is the manifestation of Jikajitsu. And the difference between when a person acting as Jikajitsu makes a correction and when the Jikajitsu makes a correction is like night and day. As a person receiving such a correction, as someone hearing a bell rung in this way, as someone following in step with someone who's leading this way, there's a clarity, there's a crispness, there's a welcoming, there's a gravity, I guess you could say, to the leadership of the Jikajitsu who is manifesting wholeheartedly in this way without attachment to self. Likewise, all of the roles are this way. When we move away from each activity being a task, each little transaction or interaction being a little tick box in the list of things that this role that I'm playing needs to do in the course of the day, and we start to connect with or start to melt into what the function of that role is in the harmony of the whole practice, things really start to move along. But this is not something that you can do. In fact, arguably, the more you exert your personality, the more you exert your will in trying to do, the more likely it is that you're just putting more and more of your own stink into the role, trying to do it with style and panache or something. When we're the shoji is another role in the Zendo. One of the, I've practiced with some really great practitioners who in the role, it's like the role of shoji is almost magical because lights go on and lights go off and there's another cushion at your seat and the tea is just the perfect temperature to drink and candles are lit and extinguished, and it's like the shoji is invisible until you start to really struggle or need something, and then the shoji's right there to catch you when you're stumbling. A shoji that's caught up in what they're doing, if they're checking off all the boxes in the list, really can't manifest there, can't manifest that way. In fact, really, the shoji who's trying to check off boxes is almost universally in the wrong place at the wrong time, worried about the wrong thing. But don't take me saying the wrong thing, as a criticism. Each of these activities, when we miss, or when we get stuck in ourself, or when we feel a limitation, this is what Zen practice is for. This practice in this form is not set out to give us an innumerable list of tasks, and the idea is that we are more and more able to successfully complete the list of tasks with as few errors as possible. This is not the point of Zen practice. In many ways, the way that Zen practice, formal Zen practice, is laid out is to give us a list of tasks that are increasingly impossible to complete successfully, and to offer us the environment and the support and the clarity to watch what happens as we miss, to watch what happens when we have to make a choice between 2 or 3 or 4 things to accomplish. Which is it that we gravitate, or which is it that we utilize our whole resources to complete? Which do we determine our worth sacrificing at any given moment? There's a balance as we practice these officer roles. I think as we come into them, the balance is always very heavily sort of weighted towards the maintenance or the upholding of the subjective I am self. And ideally, as we train in a position, it becomes a vessel or a container for us to allow us to empty out the self, to allow the Dharma activity to manifest through us as the role. One of the images that sort of comes up for me whenever I talk about this kind of thing is, first I was thinking about the Aeolian harp. This is it's basically a stringed instrument that is played by the wind. So it's usually set up in a windy place, and it has sort of panels on both sides of it, so you can open up both sides. And as the wind passes through the instrument, the strings vibrate. Or another image that always works for me is just like cut bamboo in the wind. So the wind passes through the bamboo and it makes a sound. There's no effort on the part of the Aeolian harp other than just to allow itself to vibrate. There's no effort on the part of the empty bamboo, but just to allow the wind to pass through it. This is a really difficult thing to do in terms of being a human being. When we come to practice, even the act of doing zazen, sitting down and doing this zazen practice, so often we sit down and we have an agenda and we want to accomplish something in our practice, and we want to be able to see what's going on as we sit, and we want to be able to muscle our practice this way or that way. And this is, in a lot of ways, this is just simply the exertion or the insertion of the ego self into something which is a very natural activity, just like wind passing through the trees, or wind passing through this hollow bamboo, or wind passing through the strings of the harp. The more we exert ourselves in manipulating things or trying to control things, the more controlled and contrived and tampered with the sound is. One of the wonderful things about group practice is that as we practice together in a group, the sound is heard by not just ourselves, but by a whole group of people. This is why it's so very important in Zen practice, even if we start in a practice on our own, even if we start at a distance from a community or a teacher. It's why I'm more and more recommending to people who are distance members or who practice alone, always that there comes a point where it becomes absolutely crucial for you to practice in community, for you to practice in person with a teacher. It's not just a matter of importance for distance people either. In our own community, in our own lives, there can be a tendency for us to go through phases where we don't come out to sitting, we don't come out to Sundays, we don't practice with the community, and we don't engage in face-to-face relationship with the teacher. And whenever we're doing this, one of the real dangers or one of the real traps that we can fall into is that we begin to manipulate our environment, manipulate our practice, manipulate our engagement with the world, our relationship with the world, in order to really make it more comfortable, to make it less confrontational, to make it less difficult. And it's very easy for us in this circumstance to really fool ourselves, or to really fall into believing, wow, we're really making a whole bunch of progress because look how unperturbed I am. But in reality, all we've done is created an environment which is more and more rigid so that things don't bug us. When we're at home and the dog starts barking, rather than developing a practice that is at ease while the dog is barking, we tend to figure out cleverer and cleverer ways to prevent the dog from barking, or failing that, to make a cleverer and cleverer environment in which we cannot hear the dog who is barking. Don't get me wrong. Practicing at home and practicing on our own is absolutely crucial. We have to learn how to do it. We have to learn how to make it consistent. We have to learn how to deepen in our own home practice. But coming together with a community and with a teacher, and particularly in an intensive environment where there aren't any gaps or breaks or corners to hide out in, as far as Zen practice goes, is absolutely, it's mandatory, it's crucial. If our relationship with a teacher or with a community is one in which it's very brief, it's very controlled, maybe it's on Skype or a phone call, maybe it's once in a while for an evening, we can all kind of keep it together. We can all hide our warts. We can all put on a good show for a half an hour or an hour and a half an evening. It's only through this kind of intensive practice, which really challenges us, where the cracks begin to show, where we begin to stumble and make mistakes, and where we begin to react to our own mistakes, to our own cracks and warts, and our own self-perceptions. And that's where our practice really starts to have some gravity, some weight. I wanted to talk about chanting today. The Dentsu rule is one where it's a very challenging one, because it has all of the components about all of the roles that I've been talking about. There's a challenge to fulfilling any role. As I said, to move from where we're holding on to ourself to a place where we're allowing the Dharma activity to flow through us freely. And there's no role that is as sort of clearly this way or obviously this way. There's no role that makes it as public as Dentsu. And there's no role where we ourselves can feel the pressure of our own experience, our own self-esteem, our own sense of limitation than in this role of Dentsu. There's no role where it is so much a practice of allowing the Dharma to flow through us than in this task of especially the chanting in general. But this is something that goes to all chanting. I don't know if everybody should know that Maggie has been doing musical theater for a number of years now. As you all know, theater is a part of my background. So this summer, we had some conversations, and we decided that it would be really fun if we could both do a musical together. So I went out and auditioned together with Maggie for a role in the musical of A Christmas Carol. And we both got in, we both got cast in this musical. So I've been going to the first few rehearsals and singing. Like I said, I've got a background in theater, but I've never done a musical before. This is totally a first for me. But one of the things that I am really finding is how tremendously beneficial Zen practice has been. The first rehearsal that I went to, there's a group of, 25 people in the room. And the first part of the rehearsal, the first song was a song that I was in, and the first line of that song was one that I was singing solo. So the musical director says, okay, we're going to start with you, Eshu. This is your note, this is how it sounds, and go. And I sang it. And the only reason I was able to sing it, I'm quite sure, is because of Zen practice. And also because of the way that this particular music director taught it exactly like I would have taught a Zen chant. No time to think about it. No time to second guess yourself. Go. Okay. In chanting, we have this is very much the challenge that we face. All of our stumbling and all of our lack of volume and lack of clarity in our voice, it all comes from our fixation with the mind. Of course, there's some taskiness to it. Of course, there's some practice that's required. Of course, there's some utilizing of aspects of our physical body that we're not familiar with. But this is not the greatest obstacle by any means. When it comes time to chant, the greatest obstacle is our thought that I am not a chanter. I am not a singer. I've never done this before. I can't do this. Dentsu, particularly I think in our Western culture at this point in history, this is one of the points in history, I think, for any culture, especially our culture, where singing is really weird. An individual to just start singing in the middle, particularly in the middle of a group, is very unusual, unfamiliar, uncomfortable. And in this way, it's very reminiscent to me of koan practice, where a teacher confronts you and says, so how do you manifest? How do you manifest this single sound, ah? It's a simple thing. And if we take a moment and reflect on it, say, do I have the capacity to make this sound ah? Does the person who's asking me this possess some quality or some fundamental virtue that I do not, that prevents me from saying ah? Am I able to breathe the same air? Do I have vocal cords in as abundance as the person who's facing me to say ah? All of these things are in place. There's nothing lacking. And yet when it comes time, when someone faces us nose to nose and says, all I need you to do is make this sound ah, questions come up. Well, when you say, make the sound ah, are you talking about the cosmic ah, or are you blah, blah? Our mind kicks in. Putting all this aside, no, just make the sound ah. Then our concern about the relationship comes in and we think, what if I do the ah wrong? Will it be judged as being a comment on my poor practice? What if I'm overzealous in my ah? Will it be perceived as being some kind of attention-seeking or approval-seeking? What happens if my voice cracks? What happens if someone upstairs hear me? What happens if, what is this? Is this some weird, why would I possibly make the sound ah? What's the religious significance of this? What benefit is this going to be? All of this stuff comes up. And so if you're even able to make a sound, it's kind of more of a squeak than an ah. And this is why Zen practice is so important. This is why it's so important to practice in a group and in relationship with a teacher. Because it's very easy for us, and I think we've all had this experience of, sitting in the Zendo with a koan, or sitting in the Zendo considering our role as the Jikijitsu or the Shoji or the Tenzo or the Densu or the abbot, sitting there saying, this is how things need to go, or this is how I need to manifest, or this is the response that I need to give to my koan, being totally clear on it, absolutely clear. And then the moment arises and we are asked, or the time expires and it's time to ring the bell, or we see the person jiggling around and we know the correction to be made, but all of this other stuff, this I am stuff, comes rushing into the moment, rushing into our awareness, and we become sometimes completely paralyzed by self-concern. So that even though we're completely clear on what needs to be done, we're unable to do it. The number of times that people come to interview and they respond to a koan in a very verbose, conceptual framework, and I sort of bash them around a bit, and then they say, well, what I was going to say was this. And I say, well, why didn't you say that? That's correct, or that's on the money. But we've got to wade through all of this ego before we get there. So when we're Jikijitsu, moving from this challenged, bound, very tight feeling, got to watch every minute and got to be very careful and got to do everything just so and precise, to where the Dharma activity is manifesting the Jikijitsu role. Time is minded. The bell is rung clearly. Everybody in the Zendo is aware that the Jikijitsu is at home. The Jikijitsu is present. One of the most interesting phenomena of this I've ever experienced was hearing from two separate individuals who are 20 years disparate in their age and in their development of Zen practice, who told me virtually the identical story of sitting in a zendo in North Carolina and having the way that the Jikajitsu rang the bell be the cause that they pointed to, the inspiration that they pointed to that led to their ordination as a Zen monk. The way that Jikajitsu rang the bell. So if you think it's just counting time, think again. The reason that this is important is because what we're doing in this practice, what we're doing when we take on an officer role is not a task, it's not a job, it's not a series or sequence of little details that we're taking care of. It is call and response. Not in the sense of some object calls us and so we respond in some way. But rather it is the cosmos arises as a call. Our lives arise, circumstances arise, and there is a call, an invitation. How many times does this happen in a day? How many times does this happen in our lives? Our practice is aimed at allowing us to respond freely as the Dharma activity, the manifestation of the Dharma activity, without attachment to personal self. How many times has it happened in our lives where a circumstance arises and just like in responding to a koan, maybe we know exactly what we need to do, but we're paralyzed. Paralyzed by thoughts of self, thoughts of how this would impact me, what would people think, how would this change who it is I think I am, what would so-and-so think of me, and so this moment, this transient call goes unanswered. Sometimes a call arises, we have no idea what to do. Sometimes a call arises and we know exactly what to do, but we're completely bound. We can't respond. We can't be alive. How many times in our lives is this with our life partner? How many times is this with the objects in our homes that we deal with on a day-to-day basis? How many times does this call go up from our children, and we are so bound in our own thoughts and fears and aversions that we can't respond directly from the source of this unconditioned love spontaneously and freely. That's why we practice Zen. Not to wear fancy clothes, not to get cool names, not to hang out with a bunch of really awesome people, but so that we can engage in this practice of becoming more and more free, more and more liberated, more and more awake, more and more able to spontaneously and wisely and compassionately respond to the innumerable challenges, the innumerable invitations, the innumerable calls that our life and the manifestation of this cosmos gives rise to, so that we can respond freely and with life, with dynamism, with harmony. Without fear. So there isn't even anything I can say, this is what, when we're practicing these roles or when we're doing Zen practice, this is what you need to do. Because the more you try to do anything, the more in the way you become. So in our practice, we already know what to do. It's good to read the job descriptions, the task list that we receive. It's good to be on top of the tasks that we need to do. I'm not saying just chuck them out and forget about it and just, do whatever you want to do. But as you practice them, as you practice these roles, even if you don't have a role, as you practice your harmonious functioning in the form of a day of practice, observe and apply your energy to manifesting wholeheartedly. Watching the self, the ego, the I am, the self-concern, the fear, the self-recrimination and doubt inserting itself into a spontaneous activity, just let it go. Don't attach to it. Don't fight it. Don't criticize the criticism. Just let it go. Come back to the breath. Come back to the thing that you're engaged with and apply yourself fully to it. Dissolve into it. It's really easy to think that we're getting somewhere. It's really easy to set ourselves up on our own and in our own home practice in a way where it's really easy for us to not make mistakes. But in a lot of ways, the greatest thing that we can do in our Zen practice is to kind of put ourselves out there, push ourselves to the edge, engage in practice with other people, with a teacher, and make mistakes. How do we respond? How do we move forward? How do we transform as the result of our mistakes?
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.